This comment says, I'm new to training but committed. I've recently realized we're in the beginning stages of reactivity. When we're passing another dog, I try to give him space and be the best thing in the area. In some cases, he may still pull towards another dog. I try not to pull him away, but rather tell him no or leave it, and let him choose to obey. Is that okay? I'm certainly not allowing contact, but I'm trying to give him the choice to choose me and make the right decision. So this is a really great question, and there's a lot to unpack and talk about here. So let's get started. I'm Gabrielle Johnson. I'm a certified dog behavior consultant specializing in aggressive behavior and nervous system dysregulation. So one of the first things that we need to put into place when we are dealing with any sort of behavior case, including reactivity, is management. And management does a few things. It keeps everyone safe. It prevents unwanted behaviors from being rehearsed, because the more often those unwanted behaviors are being rehearsed, the more reinforced they become, the more practiced they become. And it prevents negative associations from strengthening. So if we're dealing with frustration or anxiety or fear, it prevents those emotions, which are being associated with a certain stimuli, from being strengthened and getting more and more negative. And so as part of management, there are a lot of moments where we as the humans need to step in and make choices for our dogs. Sometimes that is through environmental management. So it's how we're setting up the environment before the dog is even there and making choices. And then sometimes it's in reaction to something, like we're on a walk and a trigger has come into view. And so we manage things by moving away or distracting our dog. And our goal is, again, to prevent negative associations from strengthening, to keep everyone safe, and to prevent the unwanted behavior from being practiced. Now, with reactivity, we could have a dog, we really need to break that down and operationalize it, right? So it could be that a dog is a bit excited and pulling towards the trigger because they're excited. It could be that they're pulling closer and are nervous, or they're pulling closer and are anxious, or they could be pulling closer because they're frustrated. And then we also need to look at the level of arousal. Are we in like kind of are we in a green zone brain? Good level of stress hormones, positive emotions? Or are we experiencing kind of a yellow zone with some positive emotions, or yellow zone with some negative emotions? Are we all the way up in an orange zone where we're adrenalized and the heart is starting to race and we're getting tension in the body and having trouble processing information? The digestive system is going offline. At which point, even if we started with positive emotions, we're no longer having a good time. Or are we all the way in the red zone, a full fight, flight, fawn, fidget response, perhaps even overwhelming that and going past that into a freeze? So there are a lot of questions here, and some of these nuances are going to depend on the answers to those questions. For example, if you have a dog who's lower on the stress scale and experiencing positive emotion, then your concern might not be as much around negative association strengthening as much as it is around preventing unwanted behaviors from being practiced. And certainly safety applies in either situation. If you have a dog, though, who is fearful or anxious or frustrated, or if we are experiencing emotions higher on the stress scale, those stress levels are really high, those stress hormones are up here, then we do really need to worry about associations being strengthened. And we need to worry about the behavior that's being rehearsed. And of course, we need to worry about everyone's safety. Your own safety as the handler, the dog's safety who's experiencing the big emotions, and the dog that they're pulling towards. And so these are situations where we're saying, I want to respect your agency, but it is my job to keep you safe and to keep everyone else safe and to prevent this from being a bigger problem when I have the knowledge to do so. And so I would not let my dog pull towards that other dog. I would move them away. And the commenter says, that they're trying to take space, but sometimes the dog still pulls forward. And so if you've taken as much space as you can, I would also in that moment be doing something. Again, it may depend on the nuances of the reactivity. I may be using treats to help calm. I may be using treats to help distract. I may be, although we're not in an ideal learning situation, pairing that dog with treats to try to create as much of a positive association as possible. But pulling towards the other dog is going to be dangerous for me. It's going to increase my dog's arousal levels, which is going to build and build and build my reactivity and make it worse. My dog is rehearsing unwanted behaviors, and if these are emotions of fear or frustration, those are also getting strengthened in their association to the other dog. So I would not let the dog pull forward, or I would be doing everything in my power to try to support my dog in that moment. And I think the desire to let the dog choose comes from a place of wanting to give our dogs agency. And agency is really important, that belief that one has control over their environment. Agency is really, really important. But in the same way that we wouldn't let a child run into a busy street just because they want to, or in the same way that I might snatch a child off the couch as they're running up to and playing with a growling dog, sometimes we have to remove agency for the well-being of the being that we are the caregiver for and that we have a responsibility to. There are a couple of pieces in this commenter's comments that I want to touch on specifically and unpack a little bit more. One is the idea of trying to be the best thing in the area. And I think this comes really from a place of like working on like manners and life skills, and the idea of you want to be more exciting than the environment. And this might have a place in some reactivity work, particularly if we're excited about engaging with the other dog and it's positive emotions and lower arousal. With any of the emotions, by the time we're in that like higher arousal, that like orange-red, there's really, it's difficult for the learner to process information. They're not in a learning brain. They're not having a good time. We're just trying to do damage control. But if my learner's in a lower stress scale, and more in that thinking brain, maybe their ability to process information is a bit impaired, but it's still there, and we're experiencing positive emotions, maybe there's a piece of like building up that engagement. That needs to be done in situations, though, where the dog can be successful. That needs to be done in situations where the dog can practice that engagement and we can build that engagement. Otherwise, if the dog is practicing the other thing being more exciting, it's actually working against my goals. But if the dog is higher on the stress scale, or I'm dealing with those negative emotions, what the dog needs there isn't for me to be more exciting, it's to feel safe and to know how they can enact their agency to get out of that situation, such as knowing that they can move away, or engaging in behaviors that will calm them on a physiological level. I wouldn't necessarily use obedience here. I wouldn't tell the dog no, which generally isn't taught to mean anything, and is just meant to punish the behavior or to make the behavior less likely. But that doesn't address the underlying need of the dog, which in a lot of the cases I work with is fear or anxiety or big frustration or arousal that they cannot control. And leave it has a higher occurrence of being taught to actually mean something. A lot of times it's taught to mean orient away and towards me. But again, is that meeting the dog's need, or am I just diverting that behavior? So I want to focus on teaching my dog how to move away, particularly with, and my work is generally with dogs who are experiencing big stress hormones, are very high on the stress scale, and are experiencing negative emotions, hyperarousal, and there's some frustration in there, or anxiety or fear. And then the commenter says, and let him choose to obey. And I really, again, I wouldn't put much emphasis on obeying. Again, if the dog is on a higher level of stress, they're not processing information. They're going into survival mode. And I really don't want obedience as much as I want my dog to be safe and to feel safe and for everyone to be safe. And I want my needs to be able to be met as well as my dog's. And I don't need my dog to choose me. But I do want them to feel safe. I do want them to know how they can get out of a situation that is stressful to them. And I do want them to know how to self-regulate. And I do want them to have some predictability. So if it is excitement, that's not turning into frustration because they think like that they should be able to meet this dog, and that's not something that can happen if we're talking about excitement.